Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous moment in an empath's life isn't when they're being drained by others, it's when they suddenly stop caring, because what replaces empathy isn't freedom, it's something far more terrifying. If you've recently felt yourself going numb to people who used to affect you deeply, this is what's actually happening inside your psyche, and why ignoring it leads to what Jung called psychological death. You've spent decades absorbing everyone's emotions, putting their needs before yours, apologizing for existing. Then one day, someone who used to trigger your caretaking now triggers complete silence. You feel nothing, and that terrifies you, because if you're not the empath, who are you? Here's what's actually happening. Jung called this shadow eruption. Every time you suppressed your needs to care for someone else, those needs didn't disappear. They went into your unconscious, into what Jung called the shadow. Every yes you wanted to refuse, every boundary you didn't set, every moment you smiled while dying inside, your shadow kept a perfect record, and now it's reached critical mass. The numbness you're feeling isn't you healing, it's your shadow seizing control of the wheel. And if you don't understand what comes next, you won't swing back to balance. You'll swing to the opposite extreme and become the cold, selfish person you've spent your entire life trying not to be. Can you name 3 things you want right now without feeling guilty? If you can't answer immediately, your shadow is already driving, and it's about to crash you into one of 3 patterns Jung documented. The first danger is the pendulum swing. You don't find balance, you swing to the opposite extreme. Here's what this looks like. Jung documented a 38-year-old woman who spent 20 years as her family's emotional mediator. One morning, her sister called, crying about her divorce, a conversation that normally cost her 2 hours and all her energy. This time, she stared at the phone, thought, "I don't care," and hung up. No explanation, no guilt. Within 3 months, she'd cut off her entire family. No boundaries, just total amputation. She became exactly what she feared: cold, detached, unreachable. The second danger is identity collapse. Your entire sense of self was built on being the caring one. Without that role, you don't know who you are. You're at dinner. Someone asks what you want to eat. You freeze, not because you don't know, but because you've trained yourself not to know for 30 years. Your needs became so buried you can't access them anymore. You start avoiding social situations entirely because every interaction reminds you that you don't know who you are anymore. You've been a function for so long you forgot you were supposed to be a person. The third danger is what Jung called shadow possession. The suppressed anger you've been swallowing for decades doesn't just emerge, it erupts. You don't just set boundaries. You burn bridges. You don't just say no, you attack. One patient went from never expressing anger to screaming at her mother in a restaurant, listing every manipulation from the past 40 years. Pure rage, no filter. That's not healing. That's your shadow in complete control. And here's why this matters. Most empaths who hit this stage don't just damage relationships, they destroy them permanently. By the time they realize what's happening, everyone's gone. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. There's a way through this that doesn't require swinging to either extreme. Jung discovered something radical. You don't have to choose between being the exhausted empath or the cold, numb person. There's a third option he called the transcendent function, and it lets you care without depleting yourself. Here's the 3-step process that moves you from shadow possession to conscious choice. First, recognize this is transition, not destination. The numbness is your psyche's emergency brake. It's protecting you from further depletion. Thank it, but don't let it drive permanently. Here's what this looks like in practice. Your friend calls needing emotional support. You notice the numbness rising. Instead of either forcing yourself to care or coldly dismissing them, you pause and say, "My capacity is low right now, but I want to show up for you properly. Can we talk tomorrow when I have the energy to really listen?" That's recognition. You're acknowledging the protection mechanism without letting it make you cruel. Second, create conscious dialogue between your empath self and your numb self. Jung's technique: write letters between both parts. Tonight, Take 10 minutes. Write from your empath self. I'm afraid if I stop caring, I'll lose everyone I love. Then write from your numb self. I'm afraid if I keep caring the way I did, there'll be nothing left of me. Read both letters out loud. Here's what happens. The moment you give both voices permission to speak, they stop fighting for control. Your empath self stops panicking that you'll become heartless. Your numb self stops protecting you from everyone. They become collaborators instead of enemies. Third, build what Jung called conscious empathy. Old empathy was automatic, compulsive, draining. New empathy is chosen, boundaried, sustainable. You don't care for everyone. You choose who deserves your empathy and when you have capacity to give it. Your mother calls with her recurring crisis at 11 p.m. Old you, automatic, yes, then resent her while losing sleep. New you. Mum, I love you, but I can't process this right now. Let's talk tomorrow at 2 p.m. when I'm fresh. And here's what changes. At 2 p.m., you show up fully present. You actually help her because you have capacity. She gets better support. You don't resent her. Everyone wins. That's not selfish. That's conscious empathy. When you integrate both sides, you don't become less empathetic. You become empowered, and the transformation affects every relationship in your life. When you integrate both sides, you develop what Jung called individuated compassion. Here's what that looks like. You feel others' emotions without absorbing them. You help from overflow, not depletion. You say no without guilt. You say yes without resentment. This isn't theory. This is how your relationships actually change. With family, your mother starts the same guilt trip she's used for 30 years. You feel the manipulation, but it doesn't hook you. You calmly say, I understand you're upset, but I'm not available to process this right now. She'll either respect it or reveal she never valued you, only your service. With friends, your friend texts with another crisis at midnight. You check your capacity. If you're empty, you respond, I care about you, but I can't be present right now. Can we talk this weekend? Real friends understand. Energy vampires disappear. With romantic partners, you stop tolerating breadcrumbs. You stop explaining yourself to someone who weaponizes your explanations. You either get reciprocal love or you walk. No middle ground. The people who truly value you adapt. The people who only valued your compliance leave, and that's not loss, that's liberation. Here's who you become. You stop asking permission to exist. You order what you want at restaurants without polling the table. You cancel plans without elaborate justifications. You say, I don't want to, as a complete sentence. You become someone who protects their energy as fiercely as they once gave it away. And people sense it immediately. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're no longer available for psychological exploitation. But here's Jung's warning. If you ignore this integration process, the shadow doesn't go back to sleep. It either possesses you permanently or it cycles. You swing between exhausted empath and cold automaton for the rest of your life, never finding balance. This is your intervention point, right now. Now you understand what happens when empaths stop caring and how to integrate it consciously. But there's a second pattern Jung discovered that's even more dangerous. What happens when empaths try to heal but accidentally create a false self that's just as destructive as the old one? Most empaths think they're doing self-care when they're actually performing spiritual bypassing. Jung developed a test to tell the difference between real healing and fake healing, and I'll break it down in the next video. If you've been doing affirmations, setting boundaries, and practicing self-love, but still feel empty inside, you need to see this. Because the difference between authentic transformation and performing transformation determines whether you break free or stay trapped in a new cage. Comment below. What's the first thing you're going to say no to without explanation?